The Sweet Tooth Adventure in Caramel Forest, or How Moderation Saved Them from Sugary Captivity. In the cozy town of Sweetville, nestled amidst the vast American prairies, every day felt like a celebration of flavor. The streets smelled of vanilla and cinnamon, and the children, it seemed, were born with chocolate-stained chins. But among all the sweet lovers, two stood out: Penny, a lively girl with fiery red pigtails that had a life of their own, always sticking out in different directions, and her best friend Tommy, a dreamy boy with dimples and an endless supply of caramels in his pockets. Their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Crumble, owned the famous Sugar Corner confectionery, a place where the wildest sweet dreams came true. Imagine display cases overflowing with mountains of pastries, chocolate fountains, and rivers of lemonade. And, of course, Penny and Tommy had unlimited access to it all. "Another donut, Penny?" Tommy asked one morning, taking a bite out of his third chocolate muffin. Penny, covered in cream up to her ears, nodded, "Of course. Can there ever be too much sweet stuff?" Their mother, Mrs. Crumble, who was hanging freshly baked cookies at the time, just sighed. "Oh, children, children. Your love for sweets will play a trick on you someday. Everything in moderation." "Mom, what are you talking about?" Tommy laughed. "Sweets are happiness. Dad agrees with me." Mr. Crumble, peeking out from behind a pile of marzipan figures, winked. "Of course, Tommy. But your mom is right. Even the tastiest cake can become too much." The children simply brushed it off. They thought their parents just didn't understand true pleasure. One day, when the sun was so hot that even the powdered sugar on the pastries began to melt, Penny and Tommy decided to venture into the caramel forest. It wasn't called that because candy grew there, though the children desperately hoped it did, but because in autumn the leaves on the trees turned a wonderfully amber and honeyed color. Today, they were looking for wild berries, to diversify their diet with something unsweet, as Penny put it. Although Tommy secretly brought a couple of chocolate bars with him, just in case. "Listen, Tommy," Penny said, navigating around a thorny blackberry bush. "I think we're lost. And there are no berries here, just pine cones." "But look!" Tommy exclaimed, pointing ahead. "What a strange little house." In the middle of a small clearing stood a crooked, lopsided hut, as if made of melted caramel. Purple smoke wafted from its chimney, and around it hung such an intoxicatingly sweet aroma that Penny and Tommy felt dizzy. "It smells like a whole candy factory," Penny gasped, her nostrils flaring. "And like a million lollipops," Tommy added, already drooling. Curiosity and an intense desire for something sweet overpowered all caution. They approached the house. The door creaked open by itself, and on the threshold appeared a short woman in a purple dress and a hat adorned with sugar cubes. Her face was wrinkled, but her eyes shone with an extraordinary friendliness. "Oh, hello, my dear children," the old woman cooed, her voice as thick and sweet as molasses. "I am Aunt Marmalade, and I live here, in Caramel Forest. Come in, come in. I have so many treats, you can't even imagine." Penny and Tommy, forgetting all their parents' warnings about strangers, tumbled inside. What they saw was beyond their wildest sweet dreams. The walls were made of gingerbread, the ceiling, of fluffy marshmallows, and the floor was paved with giant chocolate bars. Everywhere stood plates piled high with candies, cupcakes, rolls, eclairs. Even the chairs were made of whipped cream, and the table, of a giant caramel. "Help yourselves, children, help yourselves." Aunt Marmalade smiled, gesturing to the sweet treasures. "Eat as much as your heart desires. I so rarely see guests who truly appreciate my culinary masterpieces." Penny and Tommy, unable to believe their luck, pounced on the food. "Wow, this cupcake just melts in your mouth," Penny mumbled, barely managing to swallow. "And this lollipop tastes like a rainbow," Tommy added, his cheeks already stuffed. They ate and ate until their tummies resembled two round, tightly packed bags of candy. They crunched, slurped, and purred with delight. Each new bite seemed tastier than the last. They were so happy that they forgot about everything else in the world. Unpleasant consequences and a sudden revelation. But alas, the more they ate, the stranger they felt. Penny noticed it first. Her red pigtails, which usually bounced so playfully, suddenly became unnaturally stiff. She tried to touch them, and they were sticky and hard, like solidified caramel. "Tommy!" she exclaimed, her voice sounding a little muffled, as if she were speaking through thick jelly. "Look at my hair. It's sticky." Tommy, who had just been trying to bite off a huge piece of a gummy bear, reluctantly pulled himself away. He looked at his hands. They too had begun to shine and harden, and his fingers resembled chocolate sticks. "My hands, they're turning into chocolate," he stammered, trying to move his fingers, but they barely bent. At that moment, Aunt Marmalade's face abruptly changed. Her smile vanished, her eyes glowed with an evil, malicious gleam, and the wrinkles on her face deepened, making her resemble an old, dried-up plum. The hat with sugar cubes slipped to the side, revealing a sharp nose and a hooked chin. "Hee hee hee," she cackled, her voice no longer honeyed, but creaky, like rusty hinges. "Naive children. Did you think I was just giving away treats? I am the Wicked Witch, Griselda Saccharinda, and my magic feeds on your insatiable love for sweets. The more you eat, the faster you turn into sugar statues. And then I'll use you to decorate my hut. I'll have a whole collection of frozen sweet eaters." Penny and Tommy tried to stand up in horror, but their legs were already as stiff as gummy pillars, stuck to the chocolate floor. They felt a sweet numbness spreading throughout their bodies. "Help!" Penny cried, but her voice sounded like the crunch of caramel breaking in the frost. "We don't want to be decorations," Tommy mumbled, trying to move his chocolate fingers, which now looked like miniature candy bars. "Please, unspell us." Which Griselda rubbed her bony hands with satisfaction. "Soon you'll be standing next to my favorite gingerbread man and lollipop unicorn." "What a beauty that will be," she cackled maliciously. But Penny, though almost completely numb, suddenly remembered her mother's words, "Sweets are good in moderation, but too many sweets can spoil even the best day." And then, a single thought flashed through her sugar-glazed mind. She remembered Mrs. Crumble always saying that the best way to get rid of stickiness was water. Water dissolves sugar. Water. Penny rasped, her lips barely moving. "Tommy, we need water." Tommy, struggling to move his lips, which had already begun to crystallize, nodded. "Water will dissolve sugar." Griselda Saccharinda laughed even louder. "Water? There's not a drop of water here, silly children. Only sweet rivers and candy lakes. My hut is built on sugar, and sugar can't stand water." But Penny, through the haze of solidified sweetness, noticed an old, dusty vase with withered flowers on the corner of the table. And at the very bottom of the vase, she was sure she saw a few tiny drops of water. It was their only hope. With immense difficulty, overcoming her sweet immobility, Penny lowered her head. She slowly reached for the vase, feeling her neck turn into hard caramel. "What are you two rummaging about, my future decorations?" Griselda mumbled, but she was too busy admiring their almost complete sugar silhouettes. Tommy, using his last ounce of strength, tried to push his chair. It fell with a thud, and the sound caught the witch's attention. "Hey! What are you?" But at that moment, Penny succeeded. Her little nose barely touched the edge of the vase, and a few tiny drops fell onto her lips. Instantly, she felt a tingling sensation. The stickiness began to recede. Not completely, but enough for her to wiggle her fingers. She immediately stretched out her hand and managed to touch a glass nearby. It was empty, but it smelled of fresh tea. "Tommy." "The glass," she whispered, handing it to her friend. Tommy, who had just finished the last drops of cold, unsweetened tea from his mug, understood the hint. He looked around. And suddenly his gaze fell on a small pitcher on the table, from which Griselda had poured herself something during the treats. The witch said it was magic syrup, but Tommy suddenly realized it was just ordinary water that she used for her spells to dilute particularly sticky ingredients. She had simply forgotten to put it away. Gathering all his remaining strength, Tommy grabbed the pitcher and, grunting with effort, poured its contents directly onto himself and Penny. Griselda Saccharinda shrieked. Steam rose from them, and the sweetness began to melt. The stickiness receded, the hardness softened. They slowly but surely returned to their normal bodies. The witch, noticing her spells weakening, frantically waved her hands. "It can't be. My sweet magic. It's melting. My precious sugar statues." Penny and Tommy, though still a little sticky and tired, managed to stand up. They grabbed the pitcher, which was still half full, and splashed the remaining water directly onto the witch. Griselda Saccharinda hissed. Such thick steam rose from her that nothing could be seen. And when the steam cleared, instead of a formidable witch, there stood a tiny, shriveled old woman the size of a gingerbread cookie. Her purple dress shriveled, her hat became minuscule. "My power, it's melting," Griselda squeaked in a thin voice, like the creak of an ungreased cart. And then, finally shrinking to the size of a candy, she rolled off the doorstep and disappeared into the grass, apparently becoming someone's accidental treat. The hut, deprived of magical support, immediately began to collapse. The gingerbread walls crumbled, the marzipan ceiling caved in. Penny and Tommy, without losing a second, ran outside. When they looked back, there was no trace of the hut. Only a clearing littered with cookie crumbs and melted chocolates, which, to their surprise, no longer held any appeal. A lesson learned once and for all. Penny and Tommy arrived home, dirty, a little sticky, but incredibly happy. When they entered the confectionery, Mr. and Mrs. Crumble nearly fainted. "Penny! Tommy! What happened to you?" exclaimed Mrs. Crumble, seeing their sticky hair and stained clothes. The children excitedly began to tell their incredible story, showing the remnants of sticky caramel in their hair and the barely visible chocolate marks on their fingers. Mr. Crumble listened carefully, then walked over and hugged them. "Good for you for getting out. You see, my dears, sweets are good in moderation, but too many sweets can turn into not just a headache, but real trouble. Mom always said so." "Yes, Dad, we understand. Penny and Tommy said in unison. "We'll definitely remember now." And they truly remembered that lesson for life. They still loved candy, but now they always knew their limit. They started eating more fruits and vegetables, drinking plenty of water, and their cheeks were no longer so glazed, and their teeth became much stronger. Sometimes, on holidays, they allowed themselves a slice of cake or a couple of lollipops, but they always remembered the wicked witch Griselda Saccharinda and her sticky spell. And in Sweetville, a new saying emerged: "Don't be like Penny and Tommy, or you'll turn into a sugar statue yourself." And every time someone reached for an extra candy, there was always someone there to tell the story of the sweet tooth adventure in Caramel Forest.